Richard Mercer placed his right hand on the Bible at 9:07 a.m. He swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and he said it the way he said everything in a courtroom. Measured, confident, with a faint suggestion that the oath was a formality designed for lesser men. Diana watched his hand on that Bible. She had held that hand at an altar 17 years ago. She had held it in a hospital corridor when his father was dying. She had held it, without knowing, while it was already reaching for someone else. She watched it lift off the Bible. She reached into her coat pocket and felt the recorder, lipstick size, matte black, 241 days of truth, compressed into something that fit in one fist. She set it on the defense table. Quietly, the way you set down something that has been heavy for a very long time. Margaret Osei covered it with one hand, without looking at it. They had discussed the order of everything. 40 times, maybe 50. Mr. Mercer, Walsh began, voice filling the room like a man who owned it. Did you at any point during your marriage engage in an extramarital relationship? Richard's posture didn't shift. His expression didn't move. He looked at the jury the way he always looked at juries. Direct, earnest, the face of a man who finds a question almost painful in its unfairness. No, he said, I did not. The word landed clean and certain. In the third row of the gallery, Vanessa Cole exhaled. At the defense table, Diana smoothed the front of her charcoal pantsuit with one hand, a gesture so small that no one in the room noticed it except her. The ivory silk blouse caught the courtroom light at her collar, that one unfastened button at her throat, the only thing about her that wasn't completely controlled. She picked up her pen, wrote one word on her legal pad. Wait, then she underlined it, not because she needed the reminder, because writing it kept her hands from shaking. Courtroom 14. United States District Court, Northern District of Illinois. The gallery was full. Richard Mercer was a name in this city. People came to watch him win. Colleagues from the firm, courthouse regulars, 2 journalists in the back row with notebooks already open. Judge Carol Whitfield sat at the bench with the stillness of someone who had stopped being impressed by impressive men approximately 25 years ago. She made one note on her legal pad, set her pen down, looked at Walsh. Continue. Walsh moved to the podium with the confidence of a closing argument that hasn't started yet. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is straightforward. He paused. Let that word do its work. Straightforward. As if complexity were Diana's invention. Diana Mercer spent 17 years as a beneficiary of her husband's success, his income, his reputation, his social standing. And when he finally sought to rebuild his life after years of emotional withdrawal from this marriage, she responded not with dignity, but with a legal campaign designed to punish him for leaving. Diana kept her eyes on the jury. 3 of them were nodding. She noted which 3. The defense will introduce recordings. Walsh continued, his tone shifting slightly, the tone of a man preemptively managing a threat he doesn't consider serious. Recordings made secretly in the family home. We will argue these recordings are taken wildly out of context. We will show you who Diana Mercer really is. Not a victim, but a strategist. Not a wronged wife, but a woman who decided, long before this courtroom, exactly how this story would end. He set down his notes. What they cannot offer you is evidence of wrongdoing, because none exists. Margaret stood. Your Honor, the defense reserves opening statements. Walsh's smile was brief and certain. That smile meant she has nothing. Richard finally looked at Diana. His expression was almost kind, the specific kindness of a surgeon who has already made the first incision and is simply waiting for the patient to understand what's happening. He looked at her charcoal pantsuit. Something moved across his face, fast, almost invisible. Recognition. He had bought her that suit, for years ago, before everything. She had worn it to his firm's annual dinner. She was wearing it now in the courtroom where she was dismantling him. Diana looked back at him steadily. She thought about the hotel receipt, the way the paper had felt in her hand that morning. Ordinary stock, hotel letterhead. 2 nights in a Fairmont suite. The way the floor had shifted under 17 years of her life. She thought about the choice she made standing in that kitchen. Not to cry, not to confront, to document. She picked up her pen, wrote, one more word beneath the first. Everything. Walsh called his first witness before lunch. The plaintiff calls Dr. Paul Henley. Henley took the stand with the ease of a man who had done this before. He had. Diana had counted. 4 times for Richard's firm. 2 of those cases resulting in outcomes that significantly favored Richard's clients. Margaret had noted this in a brief filed 2 weeks ago. The judge allowed the testimony anyway. Evidence of bias was for cross-examination. Dr. Henley, Walsh began, you conducted a psychological evaluation of Diana Mercer. Can you describe your findings for the court? Henley settled in. The practice witness settle. Weight forward, hands visible, voice calibrated for authority without aggression. Over 3 sessions, I observed in Mrs. Mercer significant patterns consistent with emotional unavailability, chronic disengagement from interpersonal connection, and what I would clinically describe as a persistent withdrawal from marital intimacy. These patterns, in my professional assessment, would have constituted a psychologically unsustaining environment for a partner. Walsh nodded slowly. Performed thoughtfulness. In plain language, Doctor, what does that mean for this marriage? It means Mr. Mercer was, for an extended period, effectively alone in this relationship, despite being married. 3 jurors shifted. A woman in the second row, Juror 7, retired schoolteacher. Diana had noted her from jury selection. Press her lips together. Empathy or skepticism? Diana couldn't tell yet. She wrote on her legal pad, Juror 7, watch. Walsh moved to the financial records. A paralegal wheeled in a display board. Numbers, charts, organized cleanly to tell one story. Your Honor, Plaintiff's Exhibit 7. A forensic accounting report prepared by Hartwell Financial Group showing that Diana Mercer controlled and spent from joint accounts totaling $340,000 over 4 years, with no documented household purpose for $180,000 of those expenditures. Objection, Margaret said. Foundation. The report doesn't establish what those expenditures were, only that documentation wasn't cross-referenced in this particular audit. Overruled. Admitted. Walsh turned to the jury. The patient teacher. $180,000. Unaccounted for. From a man who trusted his wife completely with their finances. Diana wrote, Hartwell Financial Group, LLC filing. Date of incorporation. Margaret read it without looking up. Wrote beneath it, already done. Walsh called his next witness. The plaintiff calls Carol Mercer. Richard's mother walked to the stand carefully. 64 years old, wearing a gray cardigan Diana recognized. She had given it to her 4 Christmases ago. That detail landed somewhere soft and painful inside Diana's chest. She let herself feel it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she set it aside. Carol, Walsh said, voice dropping to something gentle, how would you describe your son's marriage? Carol's hands folded in her lap. Richard tried. He tried very hard. Diana was always somewhere else. Even in the room, she was somewhere else. A pause. I don't think she ever really let him in. Did you ever observe anything that concerned you? She stopped coming to family events. Stopped answering calls. Richard would call me sometimes, late at night, and he just sounded so... She looked for the word. Lonely. The gallery was quiet. Someone in the third row was crying. Not loudly, just the specific silence of a person trying not to cry in public. Diana did not look at Carol. She looked at the jury. The nodding 3 had become 5. Juror 7 was watching Carol with open sympathy now. That answered Diana's question. Richard sat back in his chair. The stillness of a man who believes the game is already won. He had built this carefully. The evaluation, the financial audit, the witnesses, the lonely husband calling his mother in the dark. The story Walsh was selling was clean and sad and almost believable. Almost. Ms. Osei, Judge Whitfield said, cross-examination? Margaret stood. We'll reserve cross-examination of Dr. Henley and Mrs. Carol Mercer, Your Honor. The defense is ready to call its first witness. Walsh's smile flickered, just slightly, a quarter-second disturbance in his certainty. Call your witness, the judge said. Margaret looked at Diana. The defense calls Diana Mercer. The gallery murmured. Every trial attorney in the room knew the same thing. You don't put your own client on the stand first. You build to it. You protect them. Unless you're not protecting her. Unless she is the case. Diana walked to the stand without hurrying. She sat, adjusted the microphone, placed both hands flat on the railing, not gripping it, just resting there. The way you rest your hands on something solid when the ground has been unsteady for a long time. The charcoal of her pantsuit was precise under courtroom lights. The ivory silk blouse at her collar caught the light differently. Softer, almost warm. Two things at once. That was accurate. She looked at Margaret, Mrs. Mercer. Dr. Henley testified that you were emotionally unavailable and disengaged from your marriage. Is that accurate? No. One word. No elaboration. Juror 7 looked up. Can you tell the court what your marriage was actually like? Diana took one breath. Not for drama, because what she was about to say had been locked inside her chest for 2 years and required actual physical space to come out. For the first 11 years, it was good. Richard worked long hours. I managed a household, assisted with case research at his request, handled our finances entirely, also at his request. I was present. I was engaged. I was a full partner in that marriage. What changed? I found a hotel receipt. The room went slightly quieter. The specific quiet of people choosing not to move. March of 3 years ago. The Fairmont. A suite. 2 nights. Richard told me he was in Cincinnati for a deposition. I checked the flight records. No flight to Cincinnati. No deposition filing with the Cook County Clerk's office on that date. She paused. I didn't confront him. I know him. I've watched him work for 17 years. If I confronted him without evidence, he would construct an explanation, and I would never find the truth. She reached her next sentence carefully, the way you reach the edge of something high. So I waited, and I recorded. Walsh was immediately on his feet. Objection! Recordings made without consent are inadmissible. Your Honor, Margaret said, already moving. Illinois is a one-party consent state under 720 ILCS 5/14-2. Mrs. Mercer was a party to every conversation she recorded. Every recording is fully admissible. The judge looked at Walsh. Her expression did not change. That was itself information. Overruled. Continue. Margaret walked to the evidence table. Defense Exhibit A, a recording made on October 14th of last year. Mrs. Mercer described the context. Richard came home at 11:40 p.m. I was in the kitchen. He didn't know I was awake. He was on his phone in the hallway for approximately 12 minutes. She stopped there. Did not add anything. Margaret said, Your Honor, permission to play Defense Exhibit A. Granted. The courtroom went completely, unnaturally still. The recording began. Richard's voice filled the room, low, intimate, with a careful enunciation of a man choosing every word like he's placing pieces on a board. She won't find anything. Vanessa, I've moved the accounts. Hartwell is handling the audit. Yes, I know Hartwell. I helped him set up the firm. No. She doesn't know about Grand Cayman. She doesn't know about any of it. By the time this goes to court, she'll have nothing, and I'll have everything structured exactly the way I need it. A pause on the recording. His voice changed, dropped half a register. Softer. I love you too. Get some sleep. The recording ended. The courtroom did not move. Diana looked at Richard. His face had gone the color of old paper. His jaw was set, but his right hand, the one that had rested on the Bible, had closed into a fist on the table. Slowly, the way hands close when the mind is trying very hard to stay in control of something that is slipping. In the third row, Vanessa Cole stood up, fast, the movement of someone whose body had decided to leave before her mind caught up. She took 2 steps toward the exit. A bailiff moved in front of the door. She stopped, sat back down, stared at her own hands. Juror 7's mouth had opened slightly. Judge Whitfield made one note on her legal pad, set her pen down with a small, precise click. Her face showed nothing, but she made the note. Margaret let the silence hold. 5 full seconds. She had practiced this. The silence was evidence, too. Mrs. Mercer, she said quietly, Who is Hartwell Financial Group? It's the firm that prepared the forensic accounting report submitted as Plaintiff's Exhibit 7. Hartwell Financial Group was incorporated 14 months ago. She looked at the jury. Richard Mercer is listed as a silent founding partner in the original LLC filing with the Illinois Secretary of State. Margaret held up the document. Defense Exhibit B. The LLC filing. Richard's name, clear as a signature on a confession. He hired his own company, Margaret said, not performing, just stating it, letting the weight of it land on its own, to audit his own finances, and presented that audit to this court as independent forensic evidence. Walsh stood, sat back down. There was nothing to object to. Public record. Richard leaned toward Walsh and said something sharp and brief. Walsh did not respond. He was looking at the exhibit. In the back row, one of the journalists had stopped writing. She was just watching now. Margaret did not pause. The defense calls Thomas Klein. A lean man in his 50s took the stand. Former IRS forensic investigator. Practiced economy of movement. The specific composure of a man who has testified under pressure enough times that pressure no longer registers as pressure. Mr. Klein, were you retained by the defense to conduct an independent financial analysis of the Mercer marital estate? I was. What did you find? The marital estate, as disclosed by the plaintiff, totals approximately $4.2 million. My analysis identified a series of wire transfers beginning approximately 31 months ago, consistent with the period Mrs. Mercer described discovering a hotel receipt, totaling $1.84 million, transferred in structured increments to two accounts, one in the Cayman Islands, one in a private Swiss institution, both held under shell company names. Who controls those accounts? Beneficial ownership records, obtained through treaty request. Identify Richard Mercer as a controlling party of both. Walsh cross-examined hard. Methodology, credentials, validity of treaty documents. Klein answered each question with the patience of someone who has spent 30 years being cross-examined by better attorneys than Walsh. Mr. Klein, Walsh said finally, leaning on the railing, these records are not yet verified by any U.S. regulatory authority, correct? The records are verified by the financial institutions themselves and authenticated under international treaty. U.S. regulatory review would be the next step, which is why copies were filed with the IRS Financial Crimes Enforcement Network 2 weeks ago. Walsh paused, just slightly, just long enough. You filed a report with FinCEN? Standard procedure when forensic analysis reveals offshore asset concealment during active legal proceedings. Walsh looked at Richard. Richard was writing on his notepad, fast, small letters. Diana recognized that motion. She had seen it twice in 17 years. Once when his father's estate went into probate unexpectedly. Once the night his largest client called to terminate their contract. He wrote like that when he was afraid. She felt no satisfaction watching it. She felt only the specific exhaustion of a person who has spent 2 years being right about something they desperately wish they were wrong about. Margaret was already standing again. Your Honor, Defense Exhibit C. One additional recording. Walsh, objection cumulative. This recording contains materially distinct content from Exhibit A. It is not cumulative. Overruled. The recording played. Richard's voice, but earlier, 22 months ago, before the divorce filing, before the audit. His voice carried the specific ease of a man who believed he was entirely safe. Walsh, listen to me. When we file, I want the psychological evaluation done first. I need her painted as unstable before a single financial document hits a courtroom. Yes, Henley. He'll do it. He's done it before for us. I need this clean. I need her to walk away with nothing, and I need it to look like she earned nothing. The recording ended. Dr. Paul Henley, still seated in the gallery, stood, picked up his briefcase, walked toward the exit. The bailiff did not stop him. He was not under subpoena to remain. But 12 jurors watched him leave. Juror 7 turned back to look at Richard. Her expression had changed completely. Walsh requested a recess. 15 minutes, Judge Whitfield said. Diana stayed in her seat. She drank water from a paper cup, looked at her legal pad, let herself feel, for exactly 15 seconds, the full weight of what was happening in this room. Then she set it down. She had 4 more exhibits. The recess ended. Walsh returned recalibrated. whatever he and Richard had discussed in the hallway. And Diana could guess, because she knew how Richard thought when the ground moved under him. Walsh came back with the specific energy of a man who has decided the only remaining option is destruction. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests permission to recall Diana Mercer for cross-examination. Ms. Osei, no objection. Diana took the stand again. Same posture. Hands flat on the railing. The charcoal pantsuit exactly as it had been this morning. Composed, unrumpled, like the woman wearing it. Walsh did not use his notes. He came to the center of the room and stood there, and the absence of the podium was deliberate. It removed the barrier, made it feel less like a legal proceeding and more like a confrontation between two people. Mrs. Mercer, you recorded your husband secretly, in your own home, for 8 months. He was a party to the conversations. Illinois law. I know the law. His voice cut cleanly. My question is about your character. 8 months. You didn't confront him, didn't seek counseling, didn't consult a lawyer until you had a year's worth of ammunition. You surveilled the man you were married to. I gathered evidence. You spy on people you love? The question was designed to sting. It did. Diana felt it, not as anger, but as something older and heavier. The particular grief of being made to feel wrong for surviving correctly. I documented the truth about a person who was constructing a legal case to take everything from me. Yes. Walsh pivoted. Mrs. Mercer, the $180,000 in unexplained withdrawals from the joint account. Your withdrawals, were they used to fund this case? The investigators, the forensic accountant, this entire strategy? Some of them. Yes. So you withdrew joint marital funds without your husband's knowledge to finance legal action against him. He was hiding $1.84 million offshore. I withdrew $180,000 from an account I had full legal access to in order to protect myself from a man who was systematically. That's your characterization. That's the evidence. Mrs. Mercer. Walsh's voice dropped, became almost conversational. This was the most dangerous register, the one that felt like reason. You secretly recorded him, secretly withdrew funds, secretly hired investigators, secretly built this entire case. He paused. Is there anything you did openly in this marriage? The question landed. Diana felt it the way you feel something that is both unfair and partially true, the kind of wound that has a small true center surrounded by a lie. And you have to cut through the lie to reach the truth without losing the audience in the surgery. She was quiet for 3 seconds. Not performing quiet. Actually quiet. She looked down once. Just once. At her hands on the railing. The ivory silk at her wrists. Her wedding ring was gone. Had been gone for 14 months. There was still, faintly, the ghost of an indent where it had been. She looked back up. I loved him openly, she said. For 17 years. I trusted him openly. I built a life with him openly. She looked at Walsh directly, and he used every single one of those open things against me. So yes, the last 8 months, I was careful, because he had already taught me what happened when I wasn't. The room was very quiet. Juror 7 had both hands pressed together in her lap. Walsh let the silence sit. He wanted the jury to read it as bitterness. Diana could see him wanting that. No further questions. Diana walked back to the defense table. Margaret touched her hand. Brief, just a second, Diana sat down. She was steady on the outside. Inside, she felt something close to the edge of the thing she had been holding back for 2 years. Not tears, exactly. Something older than tears. The specific exhaustion of a person who has been right and careful and strong for so long that the cost of it has become its own weight. She wrote on the legal pad, "Do it now." All of it. Margaret read it, looked at Diana. Diana wrote again. He almost made me doubt myself just now. Don't let him recover. Margaret understood. She stood. Your Honor, the defense has additional evidence to present. Defense exhibits D through G. Walsh, Your Honor, this is irregular timing. It's a bench trial, Mr. Walsh. Evidence doesn't have a schedule. Ms. Osei, proceed. Margaret walked to the center of the courtroom. No performance. No pause for effect. She moved with the economy of someone who has been waiting a long time to do this correctly and intends to do it correctly. Defense Exhibit D. She handed copies to the clerk, to Walsh, to the judge. Phone record subpoena from Verizon for Richard Mercer's personal cell account, 28 months. She put one chart on the display screen. Clean, highlighted in 3 colors. 412 calls and text exchanges between Richard Mercer and Vanessa Cole during the period he testified this marriage broke down due to Diana's emotional withdrawal. She pointed to the highlighted dates. March 14th, the Fairmont receipt date. Richard's phone pinged a cell tower in Chicago's River North neighborhood, not Cincinnati. April 2nd, same. June 9th, same. Every claimed business trip in this 18-month window shows his device active within the Chicago metropolitan area. The jury foreman wrote something on his notepad. Deliberate, slow, the kind of writing that means a decision is forming. In the gallery, Vanessa Cole's posture had changed. She was very still now, the stillness of someone trying not to exist in the room they are in. Walsh stood. Objection! Cell tower data requires expert authentication. Defense Exhibit E. Margaret was already moving. Authentication affidavit from Verizon's Senior Data Compliance Officer. Notarized. Submitted under Federal Rule of Evidence 902-11. Walsh sat down slowly. Defense Exhibit F. Margaret opened the manila envelope, set the documents on the clerk's desk with careful hands. Employment records from Mercer, Walsh & Associates. Billing records. Internal communications. HR files related to Vanessa Cole, hired as junior associate 29 months ago. She let that date land. 29 months ago, 2 weeks after Richard Mercer initiated the first offshore wire transfer. She turned to face the jury directly. Vanessa Cole's starting salary, $195,000 annually, unusually high for a first-year associate, partially funded through a discretionary partner compensation structure that Richard Mercer controlled unilaterally. A beat, a full, deliberate beat. He was funding this relationship, in part from firm accounts, money generated during this marriage, money that is, in part, marital property. Vanessa Cole made a sound, not loud, barely audible, something between a breath and a word that didn't finish forming. She pressed one hand over her mouth and stared at the back of Richard's head. Richard reached for his water glass. His hand covered it, did not lift it, set back down flat on the table. His fingers had a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of a man exerting every available resource to appear still. He was failing, barely, but failing. Walsh was writing fast. The same fast, small letters Diana had seen on Richard's notepad. Fear spreads. Defense Exhibit G. Margaret held up a single sheet of paper. A text exchange between Richard Mercer and Clifton Walsh, retrieved from Walsh's firm-issued device through third-party discovery. Walsh was on his feet instantly. Attorney-client privilege. These are not legal communications, Margaret said, and her voice had an edge now. Not anger. Something more controlled than anger. They are instructions on what Carol Mercer should say on the stand, written out in advance, sent 3 days before her testimony. She read directly from the document. Richard writes, "Tell her to say Diana stopped coming to family events around 2021. That's when we need the narrative to start." Walsh responds, "What if she asks about the Fairmont?" Richard, "She doesn't know about the Fairmont. Keep it to family events and the phone calls." She's sympathetic. Use that. The gallery broke open. The judge gavelled. Once, twice, 3 times. Order. I will clear this gallery. Silence felt like something dropped. Judge Whitfield looked at Walsh. 30 years on the bench. She had seen coordination before. She had seen men in expensive suits construct elaborate architectures of half-truth and call it testimony. Her face showed nothing, but her pen moved. One note, underlined, Mr. Walsh. Are you aware that coordination of witness testimony constitutes obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. Section 1512? Walsh's voice, when it came, had lost its bottom register. The volume was technically present. The certainty beneath it was gone. Your Honor, I would like to request. Sit down, Mr. Walsh. He sat, in the back row, The Tribune reporter had stopped typing entirely. She was watching Walsh's face with the focused stillness of someone committing it to memory. Margaret said, "Your Honor, Defense Exhibit H. One final recording." She picked it up carefully. This was the one Diana had carried longest. The last one, the one from the evening she had almost stopped, had sat in her kitchen with the recorder in her hand for 4 full minutes, the charcoal pantsuit still on from a meeting with Margaret, wondering if she was the person Walsh described. Cold, absent, calculating. She had looked down at the ivory silk at her wrists. She had thought, "I know who I am." She had pressed record. The recording was 47 seconds long. It played. Richard's voice. Calm. The register he used when explaining things to people he considered beneath him. "Here's what's going to happen, Walsh. She gets nothing. I've been planning this for 2 years. The psychological eval, the audit, the witnesses, it's all built. She thinks she's a victim." A pause. That's her greatest weakness. She still believes in fairness. People who believe in fairness lose. 47 seconds. The recording ended. No one in the courtroom made a sound. Richard Mercer was looking at his hands on the table. Both hands, open and flat, like a man who had set something down and didn't know how to pick it back up. His jaw held, but the slight tremor that had been in his fingers had moved, barely visible, barely there, into the set of his shoulders. The architecture of his composure was still standing, but something inside it had given way. Vanessa Cole was crying now, quietly, without covering her face, the cry of a person who has stopped caring who sees, because she had just heard, in a room full of witnesses, the voice of the man she believed loved her describe people who believe in love as people who lose. She understood, finally, which category she was in. Margaret returned to her seat. She said nothing further. The silence did the rest. Judge Whitfield removed her reading glasses, set them on the bench, looked at both tables for a long moment, not with anger, not with sympathy, with the specific attention of a person who is about to say something that will matter and intends to say it exactly correctly. Before this court issues findings, I want to address several matters directly. The forensic accounting report submitted as Plaintiff's Exhibit 7 is hereby stricken from the record. The court finds sufficient evidence to conclude that Hartwell Financial Group lacks independence from the plaintiff. The report is inadmissible under Federal Rule of Evidence 702 and this court's inherent authority to exclude tainted evidence. Walsh did not move. The psychological evaluation conducted by Dr. Paul Henley is similarly stricken. Defense Exhibits A and G together established that the evaluation was solicited as part of a coordinated strategy to misrepresent Mrs. Mercer's character to this court, not as an independent clinical assessment. The court notes that Dr. Henley chose to leave these proceedings rather than face cross-examination. The court notes that choice. Richard's jaw tightened. Released. His right hand moved slightly on the table. Not a gesture, just a small involuntary motion, the kind the body makes when the mind is absorbing something it has no mechanism to reroute. Regarding the offshore assets identified in Thomas Klein's forensic analysis, the court finds his testimony credible and sufficiently authenticated. The $1.84 million in transferred assets will be included in the marital estate calculation for equitable distribution. She put her glasses back on, looked at the summary. Total marital estate, adjusted, $6.04 million. She read the distribution. Diana received 60%. The marital home, the domestic liquid assets. A judgment against Richard for attorney's fees under 750 ILCS 5/508B. Fees caused by bad faith litigation conduct. Richard received the offshore accounts, which were now flagged by FinCEN. He could try to access them. Regarding Defense Exhibit G, the Witness Coordination Communications, this court is referring the relevant materials to United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois for review under 18 U.S.C. Section 1512. This is not a finding of guilt. It is this court's obligation to refer credible evidence of potential criminal conduct to the appropriate authority. She looked at Walsh, then at Richard. Richard looked back at her. His face was composed. From a distance, it might have read as dignity. From close enough to see his hands, it read differently. Court is adjourned. The bailiff called it. Everyone rose. Richard remained seated for 3 seconds. Just 3. The specific 3 seconds of a man who no longer trusts his legs to carry him away he needs to be seen to be carried. He stood, straightened his tie. That precise, practiced motion, the last reflex of a man whose reflexes had been built for a courtroom he no longer controlled. He looked at Diana. She looked back. She did not smile, did not look away, just met his eyes with the full, steady attention of a woman who had spent 241 days making sure that this moment would be completely honest. Then she reached down, picked up the recorder from the defense table, and dropped it into her bag. The hallway outside Courtroom 14 smelled like old marble and coffee from the clerk's office down the corridor. Diana sat on the wooden bench near the window. Margaret was on the phone, speaking quietly, efficiently, the way she did everything. The city was visible through the glass. Gray, ordinary Tuesday, November light. Pedestrians moving on the sidewalk below with no idea what had just happened in this building. That seemed right. The world outside courtrooms doesn't wait. Diana opened her bag. She took out the recorder, held it in her palm. Matte black, lipstick size. The weight of it was nothing. Lighter than her phone, lighter than her keys. Lighter than what she'd been carrying before she pressed record for the first time. She thought about the evening she had recorded Exhibit H. Sitting in her kitchen, still wearing this charcoal pantsuit, the ivory silk warm at her collar. For minutes of doubt, then one decision. She smoothed the front of the pantsuit now, the same small gesture she had made at the defense table this morning when Richard first looked at her. The fabric held its shape, same as it had on the first day of trial, same as it had the day she wore it to his firm's annual dinner, for years ago, when she had still believed in the life they were building. She had worn it here, to the courtroom where she had finished it. That felt right. Vanessa Cole walked out of the courtroom alone. She didn't look at Diana. She walked to the elevator, pressed a button, stared at the doors. Her eyes were dry now. She had finished crying. What was left looked more like the specific blankness of someone beginning the long process of understanding they had been used. Diana watched her, felt no hostility, felt something closer to recognition. The recognition of a woman who had also believed for a time that she was the exception to how Richard Mercer operated. Neither of them had been the exception. Margaret ended her call, sat beside Diana on the bench. Cook County Register will record the judgment by end of week. FinCN referral is logged. The U.S. Attorney's Office makes its own timeline. I know. Diana. Margaret paused. You should feel something right now. Diana looked at the recorder in her hand. 241 days. 382 hours between the hotel receipt and this bench. Between the kitchen doorway and that moment in the courtroom when Richard's voice had filled the room and the room had understood. I feel tired, she said, and I feel like calling my sister. Margaret nodded. That's a good place to start. Diana stood. She put the recorder back in her bag, zipped it closed, straightened her charcoal jacket one final time. Not for the courtroom, not for anyone watching. Just a habit of a woman who had learned, over 241 days, to keep herself composed until she was somewhere safe enough to stop. She thought about Carol Mercer, who would go home tonight and learn what her son had built. Who would have to hold that knowledge at her own table, in the gray cardigan Diana had given her 4 Christmases ago? Diana felt grief about that. Genuine, uncomplicated grief. Carol had been real. That had always been real. She thought about the 11 good years, about who she had been inside them. She walked to the elevator, then stopped, turned. She looked back down the hallway at the closed door of Courtroom 14. Just a door, ordinary wood and institutional glass. Nothing to see, but she stood there for a moment anyway, because behind that door was a bench where she had sat and said, I loved him openly for 17 years into a microphone in front of strangers, and been believed. Behind that door was a table where she had set down the recorder, gently, the way you set down something that has been heavy, and waited for the truth to do what she had always believed truth was supposed to do. She had believed in fairness. She had built the case anyway. She had won. She turned back to the elevator, pressed a button. The doors opened. She stepped in. The last thing visible through the narrowing gap was a hallway. The marble floor, the The bench by the window, the November light falling ordinary and clean through the glass. And then just her own reflection in the closing doors. A woman in a charcoal pantsuit and ivory silk, tired, going home.